set up to make a lot more progress next year with the strategic investments laid out in this budget. We started the year right off with a significant change, and your trust in stopping a decision that had already been made and shifting gears into the New York State Deferred Comp Plan that yielded tremendous savings for the employees, and it established a groundwork for our operations, and that we were going to do critical analysis of decisions and move forward and not be bound by previous decisions, but be led where the facts took us. And that was a trying first project to turn that around on, but one that resulted in a 1/3 increase in our enrollment. So we went from 300 active enrollees in the county to over to 400, and that was a very significant. Our goal for increase was 20%. We increased by 33%. So that was really remarkable. We made progress on broadband, and we're happy to report that the installation is moving along well. The bonds have been kept up to date. When requested to go back and do repair work, that's happened, and Bill and Carmen have been meeting out on site, and everything's progressing out there very well. The big project that really made this job appealing to me was the CGR organizational analysis that you were doing. We received that early in the year, presented recommendations to the legislature for proceeding, and we made a lot of progress on a number of those priorities. Some of those are continued to move forward in next year's budget and are included in this tentative budget presented to you. We accomplished bridge financing for the water system in Aurora. We completed and finalized a long-standing drainage project problem outside. Gary worked incredibly with the city, who was a great partner in that. We worked with so many of you and our municipal partners to complete the shared services plan. There's a number of items in this budget focused on that, most significantly the purchasing director. You approved us to create a new website and codify the county laws. Both of those projects are underway and funded already. We'll be moving forward with hiring a director of public works. We completed the reorganization of the administration department with the exception of adding the purchasing director that's in the tentative budget. And we've made some progress in intergovernmental relations, getting the Canal Corp to come up and take responsibility for some of the assets that they own, and working very collaboratively to address and mitigate against flooding problems in Port Byron and Weedsport. And most significantly, and directly relevant to the budget, as I emailed you last week, we were able to achieve significant savings in our workers' comp policy while maintaining our current broker and same levels of coverage in the policy. I thought it would be helpful to start with what I went into the budget with as goals. So the budget goals were to present a budget that was below the tax cap. The projected tax cap at this time is 3.8%, and the proposed budget will have the tentative budget has a tax levy of 2.9%. My proposed budget is to use the tax levy and continue managing the fund balances in accordance with the county fund balance policy. There's a focus on capital investments, infrastructure, and equipment, as well as organizational priorities. Most significantly in public works, human resources, payroll, finance, IT, and emergency management. The tentative appropriations for 2019 are $150 million. 135 of that is the A fund, the general fund appropriation. Just under 12 million is the road fund. A little over $2.5 million in the machinery and equipment fund, and about $745,000 in employment and training. That's federal pass-through money, so that doesn't have a local share. I thought it would be helpful to understand where this budget is starting from, and that is projected to be over $22 million, $22.2 million in A fund balance, and about $1 million apiece in the road fund and the machinery fund. with a total unappropriated fund balance of $24.3 million. For those of you who aren't familiar with how the fund balance policy works and how fund balances work, I thought I had to learn about it during this process, so I thought I would explain it for those of you that need it. Otherwise, it was just to show off that I learned what I was supposed to. What this graph shows is that our fund balance policy says that we should maintain between 10 and 15% of total revenue for our fund balance. So the top of the blue line, the blue bar here, is where 10% of the fund balance would be, of the total revenue would be. And the top of the red bar is where 15% is. The yellow diamonds show you where the fund balance was on a given budget year, and the dotted line is the trend, that fund balances continue to trend above the fund balance policy. I also wanted to show you how fund balance has been utilized from 2012 onward. Back in 2012, you were budgeting between $4.5 and $5 million of fund balance. That's the blue line here. And then the green shows you what the actual draw on fund balance was, the actual impact. So you were budgeting about $4.5 to $4.75 to $5 million, and then you were using about 3.1 here, about 4 here. From 2014 on, the fund balance draw, the budgeted fund balance draw, has not had an actual impact on the fund balance. 2014 was extraordinarily high. That was due to the proceeds that came in from the nursing home. But from 2015 on, 2017 I'll explain in a second, but from 2015 on, you've budgeted a fund, a general fund appropriation or draw on the budget, but you haven't actually had to use it. 2017 shows a decline in fund balance. That was from the $4 million appropriation to the road and building reserves. 2018, we're conservatively projecting $1.5 to $2 million additional increase to fund balance. And the proposed budget shows a under $1 million draw on the A fund. It's also important to look at fund balance not just in terms of the A fund, but to look at it in terms of all the funds. So again, you can see 13 and 14 when they were drawing pretty heavily on the A fund. And what you don't see here is very much draw at all on the road fund or the machinery fund. At those times, there weren't fund balances or significant fund balances in those accounts. And it's also important to understand where those road fund and machinery funds originate from. Those D and DM funds originate from the A fund. So what happens is that when we put the budget together, the budget for highway will then transfer X funds from the A fund into the road fund and Y funds into the DM fund. And then if those funds aren't spent, that yields the fund balance that's left in the road fund and the machinery fund. I explain all that so that everyone's on the same page in understanding that whether the draw comes from the A fund, the D fund, or the DM fund, it all originated as tax levy dollars in the A fund at one point. And I show that to demonstrate that while the A fund draw, the proposed A fund draw in the tentative budget is higher this year than last year, the cumulative draw is pretty consistent. The cumulative draw here, the A fund draw was about $600,000 last year. The D fund was $550,000, and I think this one was, I don't remember exactly what the number was, but the cumulative was 1.3, and the cumulative draw here this year is proposed to be 1.4. And this is the summary, this is in your budget books. I'll take just a quick minute to orient you to how the budget book is laid out. The budget book has a cover letter and then a summary and overview. Then you'll get into some summary tables and organizational charts and priorities for each department. In previous years, those have been in front of each budget, but some departments have multiple budgets and are split, and we thought it would be a lot easier to have kind of two halves to the budget, the organizational structure and priorities and then the budget at the end. And then the last thing that's in your budget, which is new this year, is an appendix that includes multi-year plans in the highway department. It includes a 5-year paving plan, a 4-year equipment plan, and a listing of ongoing capital projects. As we move forward into 2019, we will look to build a more comprehensive capital budget that pulls in all of the equipment and buildings and capital needs from buildings and grounds and other departments as well. The tentative general fund revenue shows about 18% of the budget comes from property tax, 10% sales tax. And the largest portion of our budget is federal aid, at 50%, and then another 15%, so 65% in state and federal aid together, and then some fees. The sales tax revenue is proposed to be set at $23 million. That establishes a level where we are this year. This number here for 2018 is budgeted at $22,500,000. We're conservatively projecting to end the year at $23 million. Last year we came in at $23.4 million, and we do think that $23 million is a reasonable place to budget for this year. The main drivers of the sales tax are fuel sales, as well as inflation is having a significant impact in driving sales tax numbers up. With 4% unemployment, the economy continues to do well, and if inflation goes up, we would expect sales tax to continue to go up. There's also a very strong likelihood, not a guarantee, but a strong likelihood that the state will act on the Internet Sales Tax Act in the next session, which could have additional impact on our sales tax. The general fund expenses, the largest portion of our budget is salaries and benefits, about 40% when you combine salaries and fringe benefits together. Got the transfers to the highway department, Medicaid, and then these are our departmental expenses. So DSS, the jail, everything else is included in here. And these, I'm assuming, are going to be a number of the things that we're going to go through as we walk through the departments in the budget workshops each of the next Thursdays. So the budget pressures that we face in 2019 is a 10% increase in health insurance, just under $900,000. I think that exact number was $870. 53 weeks on the calendar next year, which means we have an extra Medicaid payment. So that accounts for $1.2 million of an increase, just those two numbers alone. And the decreased use of defund draw. While it was prudent to spend those down in previous years, they're now at a level where it's not prudent to keep spending them and does warrant replenishing it with an increased draw on the fund balance, on the A fund balance. So you'll see a swing of $300,000, and that was that. Oops, sorry. That was the difference you see right here. The 300,000 shifting from the D fund here to the A fund here. And we've also budgeted in anticipation of salary adjustments. We have 2 labor contracts to finalize next year, as well as non-bargaining adjustments as well. Budget enhancers, as I discussed, we projected a $750,000 budgetary increase to sales tax, which is lower than what we received last year, which was an extraordinary year, is lower than what we're projecting to receive this year, but we feel a responsible number. 911 operations, 911 has grant money to offset operating expenses. In previous years, those numbers weren't always available at this stage, but they are available now, and they allow us to account for them. There's a state's made, and I announced this and talked about this at the State of the County in April. The state's making a significant investment in indigent legal services to expand funding for our assigned counsel program. That has allowed us to rebalance funding in accordance with the workloads between Youth Bureau and assigned counsel. Some of you may recall in the CGR report, they noted that the 90% of the work was done in assigned counsel and 10% of the funds came from assigned counsel. This allows us to flip that funding back and offload to state revenue, state aid, about $185,000 in salary and benefits. And then through strategic negotiation and injecting some competition into our insurance process, we're able to reduce our workers' comp savings by $150,000 this year, as well as $150,000 next year, for a 2-year savings of $300,000. There's 5 new positions in the proposed in the 2019 budget. Purchasing director, which we've been talking about for some time, a senior human resource associate to really help us refocus HR. We have, if we're really looking at the structure of our department, 1 HR person and several civil service people. And civil service is a lot of what that office does, but we don't have enough HR capacity, and this would help address that. We have a principal computer technician, which would be an additional staff person, and then two operators at the highway department, 1 heavy operator and one MEL. I guess we don't have to call it medium anymore because we don't have lights anymore. There's 2 positions that have been traditionally contract positions in the county attorney's office, code enforcement officer and our juvenile justice attorney. Those are both proposed to become part-time employees, so the funds in the budget are moved from professional services to an employment line. And then we've proposed to restore funding in 2019 for the emergency management director position. So it was 50% funded in 2018, and we proposed fully funding it in 2019. So the way the big picture looks is that the tax levy has increased through some of the reassessments that have been going on throughout the county, and that has resulted in a tax rate decrease of, sorry, I forgot the number, Lynn, was it 1.2, 1.12? About just over 1% to 8.10 per.
It was $8.34 going to $8.31.
Okay. One more time.
$8.34 going down to $8.31.
3 cents.
So the tax rate's gone down a little over 1% to 3 cents. In conclusion, I believe that this is a responsible budget that makes strategic capital and organizational investments that addresses the county's needs. It maintains adequate fund balance and reserves, and I will propose, once the final accounting is done for 2018, for an additional appropriation into the building and road reserves once we see where the final numbers come in. But I'm tentatively predicting that I would ask you to appropriate $1 million into each of those accounts out of the fund balance. Next steps, the Ways and Means Committee has 15 days to work on this budget. They've scheduled 2 workshops on November 1st and 8th, and I believe we've sent out the schedule of which departments are being reviewed. Okay, everybody has that. There's a preliminarily, Ways and Means is scheduled to act on the setting the preliminary budget November 13th, and the legislature has scheduled a hearing for the budget on November 27th. Again, I want to just say thank you for this opportunity. This has been an incredible learning process, and I've enjoyed my almost year here tremendously. I think that we are trending in the right direction, and this budget sets us up to achieve a number of the priorities that we've discussed throughout this year and a number of initiatives that we seek to move forward with your partnership. So thank you for your leadership and your support, and I'd be happy to take any questions or defer them to Lynn if I can't answer them.
Tim?
Go to your first graph, the wheel. I mean, of that budget, how much is mandated? I mean,
We did calculate that last year on the 18 budget. I don't believe we calculated that yet for this tentative budget, but we can probably do that for Thursday.
It's roughly about 90% of her.
About 90%. That's what it was in 18. You know, it could actually go up with Raise the Age.
that's what raise the age could increase that to,
Chris?
Thank you, sir. So you said that you're looking at approximately 1.4% draw on fund balance, is that?
1.4 million total draw
Sorry, yes, 1.4 million.
on all fund balances.
Okay, so, but then you asked for 2 million for, well, one from each account, is that just the?
I will recommend when the final accounting comes in to appropriate $1 million into the building reserve and $1 million into the road reserve once the final accounting for 2018 is done. So if you go back to this slide here, what you see is that in 16 this number was getting pretty high, and the leadership at the time wisely recognized that that was falling outside of the limits of the fund balance policy, and they, and so when you go here, you see, even though it was a very strong year, the fund balance, the impact of fund balance went down because they established 2 reserve accounts. $2 million went to a road reserve account, and $2 million went into a reserve account for buildings. So as we project an additional increase this year, once that accounting is finalized, I would recommend that we make a similar appropriation into the reserve accounts of $1 million each. And depending how the final numbers come out, I could recommend even higher.
And that's to maintain the 10 to 15%, that's right?
Well, it's to do a couple of things. Certainly, it's to keep as close to that 15% limit as we can, but more importantly, it's to save for our capital needs. I think there's a wide recognition that there hasn't been a sustained investment in our infrastructure, and that was why I think Mr. Batman and the leadership at the time sought to, and the legislature wisely concurred, sought to establish those reserves for addressing our infrastructure needs. The road reserve to date is still fully there. It hasn't been used. Everything we did this year, we funded either out of operations or out of the D fund balance, which is the other reason for the 300 shift. We did Parcell Road and we did Stewart's Corner, and that has brought the D fund balance down to about $1 million. And I think we've got a 200,000 draw on it this year instead of 550. So we wouldn't want to go below 800,000 in the D fund balance.
Thank you.
Andy?
So, this is for you or Lynn, I guess. On people's tax bill, when it says percent change, what is the actual number that they'll see, this 1.12?
Yes. No, the 1.12 is the percent change. They'll see the 8.31.
8.31.
$8.31 is the tax rate in
Oh.
the account.
I can give you another chart that has all of that. The chart wasn't on the presentation, but I used a couple columns from the chart to make the graph.
Yeah, but it always shows percent change too, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's 3 columns, and I graphed 2 of them.
This number in the book is wrong. That's the problem, Justin. We just realized right before here the formula was wrong. It's not 1.12 increase, it's actually a decrease. See how it went from $8.34 down to $8.31?
Well, that's kind of what I was trying to
Yes, you're
figure out.
absolutely right. It's not the right number.
So the number is right, but the tax rate is wrong.
The change is wrong.
I was wondering how it could be 3 cents less.
Yeah, so we caught that literally right before the presentation. We were able to update the presentation, but we didn't rerun your books.
Brian?
Justin, can you just explain maybe your increase in sales revenue projection? The way you explained it was that for next year, you are projecting higher than what we did this year, but still lower than the revenue we've actually received. That seems like it's becoming, it's an aggressive projection on our sales tax revenue projection. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Sure. 2017, the sales tax number was 23.4. We're projecting over 23 million this year. Our conservative projection for this year is 23, because we don't want to over project how the holiday season is going to run. But we're trending very well this year, and 23, I think, is a reasonable budget number based on looking at where the economy is now and where it's been the last 2 years. So what this chart shows, and I skipped over this one. I go through this one in great detail. The gold number here is the budgeted sales tax from 2011 forward.
Right.
And then the graph to the left is the actual sales tax number. So, does that help a little?
Well, it does, but you're looking at this from, if you look at 2014 to 2015 actual, you went down from that year to the next, and that could actually happen to us this year, which would make the budgeted amount.
It could. I can't sit here and, tell you that I have a crystal ball and that this is where it will be. But based on where the market is, what the projections that we're getting from NISAC and the state, we feel confident in this as a budgetary number. And I would say that if we were wrong, then we have a very healthy fund balance available that could make up the difference. But we're fairly confident in the number based on the market conditions, based on the increase in inflation, and the things that make up are driving our primary sales tax figures.
Tim?
Justin, you mentioned the savings in the workers' comp. I've been trying to get some analytical numbers from when we got out of the nursing home business, which gives us a frequency and a severity cost in our workers' comp program, and that's what we're seeing is the savings in some of those operations. I'd still like to know why. At one time, the nursing home was making $1 million for the county, and then we got out of the business because it was costing us $1 million. I'd like to see whether or not the decisions of this board, what the impact was of getting out of that operation. I can see it in the workers' comp program because of the savings, because our modification has gotten much better since the frequency and severity has gone down. But sometime, I'd like to know the dollar amount that we're saving. Employees, health insurance, the long-term liabilities of those employees, those types of things.
Forgive me for being tardy. You may have addressed this, but the two questions. One is the NISAC projection for sales tax is what? What are they suggesting counties use?
They were suggesting that we look at what we're doing this year as a base, and they also sent out the top 20 contributors to sales tax, as well as the increase in fuel sales tax, 18% just since January, between January and September of this year.
So then, I guess what's there? They generally come up with some kind of recommendation that says you may want to consider no increase in sales tax, or a 1% increase, or a 2% decrease, or whatever. They usually come up with such a recommendation.
I will double check. They sent us some information, and I don't recall seeing a specific number in it, but I will double check that.
Okay, great, thanks. And the other thing is, what is our tax cap projected to be?
Almost 3.1.
Okay, and that's based on the savings from last year, the carryover, or is that the actual tax cap for this year without any carryover?
Both.
So
I
that
believe,
includes the
right, Lynn?
carryover?
3.8.
Yeah,
That
with
includes
the three,
carryover.
with the carryover.
And so what is the actual without the carryover?
I didn't do it separately without the carryover, because the carryover automatically goes into it, but I can tell you what the carryover is.
Yeah, great. And that is, I'm sorry, how much?
I'm looking at it.
Oh, I see.
The carryover was $240,000, which is automatically calculated for our cap.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, there was an automatic, with inflation, it started at 2% is what the state controller's office starts with. And then we have many gyrations of things we have to add in and out of the calculation. Mileage,
Right.
chargeback, sales tax, road taxes, from last year and this year. So right now, it's not completely final, but we're looking at 3.08 right now.
Okay, I'm sorry, can I just clarify that? So you didn't raise, county didn't raise taxes up to the tax cap last year, they stayed below it.
That's correct.
So that difference now can be rolled over into this year?
Yes.
Okay,
that's the carryover.
and you're projecting in this budget to raise the levy to increase by 2.9%, although you could go up 3.8.
Well, because we don't have those final numbers, I wouldn't go that close.
Right.
And when you talked about the $22 million fund balance, that includes the $4 million that's been reserved that can't be used?
No, that's just the A fund. So the projected fund balance at the end of this year is 22.2, and that's just the A fund. The 4 million's in reserve. The 2 million in the road fund, in the road reserve is still there. We used about 250,000 in the building fund for the parking lot project this year, and there is proposed in the budget, I think, about 120,000 in capital projects for the building fund.
So the fund balance was around 18 million, now it's 22 million, you're saying? And that doesn't include the 4 million that you put aside?
That's just a draw. Let's see. The fund balance is right here, projected to be about 22 with our underspending and our projected sales tax number for this year, for the end of this year. So it was, I believe, 24. My number could be slightly off. No, it was 22, and then they took 4 million out.
At the end of 17, it was 20 million.
Okay.
Is the unappropriated amount at the end of 17.
And when you talk about 10 to 15% of our total revenue is the policy the county set, that dollar amount's about what?
Right
Well,
here.
it ranges between, if you look on here for 17, 19 million would be the high, and then 12.7 is the low. And obviously, it changes every year as our gross revenues go up, so we recalculate it every year as the revenue numbers change.
Legislative Daily, you'll see here, in addition to this numbers, you'll see it goes up over time, and that's because as revenues go up, your percentage of what would be per the fund balance policy would also increase.
Ryan?
If we could just, I have a question just on the 1.4 again. So I think I've discussed with you before that that amount usually isn't withdrawn actually from the fund balance. It ends up not being totally used. Like last year, I think we
Yeah.
budgeted 1.3 draw on the fund balance.
Right.
You're
So,
saying 1.4. So if we don't routinely use the amount that we expect to use as a withdrawn fund balance, we're still projecting that high number again.
I think I know where you're going, but I'm not absolutely clear on your question.
So from year to year,
Mhm.
1.3, 1.4 million, but we don't usually actually draw that much.
Right.
So how can we keep budgeting that we are expecting to draw that much if we're not doing it year to year?
Well, I think what happens is that you budget for your positions, and you budget those as if they're all filled on a given time, when you know that that won't be the case. So for example, in this year's budget, we're about $1 million underspent in salary. So where you had a $600,000 draw on fund balance from the A fund in this budget, we're underspent 1.75 just on our big ticket items that we know about, as well as sales tax is up. So if we don't use the draw and we underspend, and then sales tax overperforms, then you end up with an increased fund balance, which is what you're seeing here. I think that gets to part of your question, but I think there's a second piece that I'm missing.
Okay, so let's just say you budgeted 1.3 for last year, and we only draw on the fund balance, and we only used 750,000 of that amount. Now, this year, we have another 1.4 draw on the fund balance, but we're not expected to use that amount. How come you don't just lower the number of 1.4 down to, let's say, $1 million expected? And so we have a maybe closer, more accurate number.
That's part of what we're trying to do, and there's two pieces to that. One, I want to be clear that when we talk about the 1.3 for last year, this here, the black, is the A fund. That was 600,000. That was the budget on the general fund. This was another 550 here in the D fund. So when we're talking about that 1.3, I just want to make sure that we're all talking about the same 1.3, which was the total of the three fund balances. This year, we're proposing 1.4, but a bigger A fund draw. And what I was trying to impart in my presentation was that these other funds, the D fund and the DM fund, the source of those revenues are previous year appropriations from the A fund. So the original source of that money, regardless of which fund it is the tax levy. Now, to your other question, we could make some other projections. We could make some estimates that said, okay, we're gonna budget a negative number on fund balance, on our salary line, and assume a higher level of vacancy, and therefore not use as much draw on fund balance. That's certainly something that we could do. It hasn't been typically the way the budget's been done here, but it is something we could do, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can't, I think legally, I'm not sure, but as spend over our appropriation levels. So that's one of the things is you always want to have your appropriation levels at the highest level of probably what you're going to spend. Otherwise, we do have to do resolutions to take the money from the fund balance or to do transfers all over the place. So we're trying to budget conservatively and have every position funded and every expenditure that we think we have a budget in there for. And then we don't want to overestimate the revenues, kind of what you're saying with the sales tax. I mean, I could make that number be 24 million in the sales tax, and then you won't have any draw on the fund balance. So, you know, some people, when I used to work here years ago, would just up that number and see what would happen. So I think we've gone to a little more conservativeness on the revenues, which then we try to be conservative all year long, and we try to get as much money in here as we can, and we've been outperforming it. So I guess, you know, the expectation would be that we won't spend whatever you see on that piece of paper again, unless, you know, there is some bad activity during the year, and then we're prepared to pay for it.
Keith?
Yeah, if I may, I think more specifically to Ryan's question, if I understand it correctly, is that as you do a budget of this size, you know there are going to be savings somewhere. You don't know where. And so because you don't know where, what you have to do is budget in however it is you budget, whatever budgetary assumptions you make, knowing that something will be saved. And Lynn's point is the procedural complication. If you don't do it that way, and you look at every single line, and you say, well, okay, chances are this person won't let you do through that. If it turns out that person does stay, then you have a negative balance. And by law, as Lynn said, you can't actually have a negative amount in any account at the end of any month. And so it's technically, I mean, you often do, but that's kind of the rationale for that. You know you're going to save something. And one of the assumptions in a budget is how much are you going to save, and that will vary year to year. If people remember 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember whether it was a projection that sales tax was going to be down or savings was down or something, but we were in a position where the budget in the last about 4 months was not looking good. And so we put in place, or maybe even before that, we put in place the idea that every position needed to stay open for, what was it, a month, 6 weeks?
That was in early 17, was that end of 16
Yeah, maybe.
or early 17?
Yeah, and that's the idea that there wasn't as much saved through the year as the assumption had predicted, and therefore you had to adjust in that way at the end of the year, which is, of course, would be the other way to do it, too. But there are lots of assumptions that can be made. And I think that's the question.
And to that end about financial management, it's one of the areas where we're already seeing the impact of our new hire in the Treasurer's Department, where we just received an email about September books being closed and monthly closeout procedures. And I think that our financial management is and our attention to those kinds of cash flow management is going to increase significantly over the next 12 months. Anything else, Mr. Chair?
Any other questions, concerns at this point? I guess not, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried, thank you. Special ed to 6:30. Right, Pat? That's what, publish.
Good job.